Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. This week on the show, I'm joined by Nick Pinizzotto and Matt Ross of the National Deer Association to discuss the state of the Whitetail Union in 2025. All right, welcome back to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by First Light and their Camo for Conservation initiative. And today we are kicking off our conservation month. We do this every year for about 1 month worth of episodes. We specifically focus on conservation related issues that are relevant to deer hunters and outdoors people of all stripes. And we're kicking it off here today with another one of our annual traditions, I guess you could call it, the State of the Whitetail Union. I'm joined with representatives from the National Deer Association, the president and CEO, Nick Pinizzotto, and the director of conservation, Mr. Matt Ross. Both of them have been on the show in the past. They are friends of the show. They are terrific is the word I'm looking for, terrific representatives of the hunting community, and both have just a wealth of experience and information to share with us when it comes to this set of issues. And what we're going to be talking about, and what at least is going to lead us off, is the Deer Report, which is a document that the NDA publishes every year that kind of reviews the state of deer across the country. It looks at the latest data from state fish and game departments, giving us insight into, deer harvest trends, the numbers of deer being killed, all sorts of things related to, what types of weapons are used, how many bucks, how many does, age structure, fawn recruitment, a lot of important herd-related data, as well as covering some of the latest issues, trends, current events, different things impacting deer habitat, and deer hunting in the future. So we get a review of all that kind of stuff. We get the headlines of that most recent report. And then maybe the most interesting part of this, at least from my perspective, was the conversation that Nick and Matt and I have around what the future of deer hunting, what that might look like over the next 10, 20, 30 years. What could we as hunters have as a role in the future? What are our obligations? What are our opportunities? What are the threats? What are these major things that we need to be keeping tabs on to make sure that, these aren't the good old days of deer hunting that someday they're looking back on and wishing they had. Hopefully things continue to get better and better, right? And that's what we talk about here today. Taking a clear-eyed look at where we stand as a deer hunting community in 2025 and where are we going. So we've got a lot to come on this series over the next month. We're going to talk about deer-related issues. We're going to talk about public land-related issues. We're going to be talking about ways that we can make, issues around nature and the environment and wildlife and public lands, how we can make all of that more bipartisan. I think that's really important these days as things seem to be getting more and more ugly with this party against party fighting. I hate to see that splitting the outdoor community or pitting different groups against each other when really, for many of us, we just love this stuff. We love deer, we love deer hunting, we love wild places, wildlife, the opportunities to hunt, the opportunity to have public landscapes to recreate on. That stuff really matters. We can be a part of keeping that stuff around well into the future. And so this month, we'll be covering exactly how we can do that. So without any further ado, the first episode of our Conservation Month series, my chat with Nick Pinizzotto and Matt Ross from the National Deer Association as we discuss the state of the Whitetail Union. All right, with me now this Monday morning, I am joined by Nick Pinizzotto and Matt Ross from the NDA. Thank you, gentlemen, for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having us, Mark.
Excited to be here.
Absolutely. It's always great to have an excuse to catch up with the two of you. And we've got a good one here today because this is an annual check-in that we've had for a long time running now, but a little bit different because usually it's myself and Kip here for the usual State of the Whitetail Union, but we kicked Kip to the curb this year because he was just on the show like a month and a half ago, and I didn't want to bother him again so quickly. So I thought I'd pull in top dog at the NDA, and you, Mr. Ross, to have a good chat here. So there's a couple things I'm hoping to achieve. Number one, I'd love to cover some of the headlines of the deer report that came out this year in 2025. Get a sense of some of the most important trends and issues and numbers when it comes to deer and deer hunting. And then I also want to look forward, kind of take a glance into the future, especially since we have you here with us, Nick, to see what's on your mind and what's on the organization's mind when it comes to the future of deer and deer hunting and our role in the conservation community, I guess. So that's kind of our agenda, the itinerary here. And maybe I'll throw it to you first, Matt, since I know you get to be kind of involved in a lot of the deer report things and pulling this data and putting together this thing every year with Kip. When you look at the 2025 deer report, what stands out to you as issue number one or data point number one that was most interesting to you?
I've been thinking about that being the first time kind of doing the State of the Union on deer. There's certainly some headwinds and obstacles that we focus on, and it's really easy to think about that. And I'm sure we're going to get into some of the issues, but kind of big picture, for folks, if you hadn't read the report or if you don't follow what we do with that, and it's a team effort. So like basically our entire company is working on that. I think we are in a really good place today. There's looking forward, there's some concerns, but if hunters don't recognize, the North American deer hunter is in a pretty good spot right now. We're shooting a lot of deer, like record number of deer, and the age structure is excellent. It's like one of the best we've ever had. And so when you think about deer hunting, obviously a lot of us think about what we accomplished in the past season or in the last couple seasons. But by and large, nationally, we're in an awesome place, and deer hunters are reaping the benefits on some really amazing demographics when it comes to deer hunting and the composition of those deer that we're killing. So we should pat ourselves on the back. We should be excited that things are so good right now. We do need to look forward. We have to pay attention to the things that are coming towards us. That's what we do here at the National Deer Association. I know that you provide that platform for us to talk about it, and those things are important, but they shouldn't take away that we should celebrate how well things are going right now in the big picture. That's kind of what I think of. We're shooting record number of bucks in terms of total numbers, and then the age structure is amazing.
Yeah, so what are we at as far as, I think we're right at the record for most 3.5+ year-old bucks shot, right? We've kind of stabilized right in that. It's almost a third of the bucks harvested now, average across the nation, are 3.5+, right? Something like that.
It was a record last deer season. So the 2025 deer report uses data from the most recent, when we published it, which comes out, a month and a half ago or 2 months ago at this point. Seasons were still open. So it's for the 2023-2024 deer season. And that year, for that season, we killed 40. Let me try to think about it. I think it was 43%, which was a record in terms of age structure. We killed about 26% of that buck harvest was yearlings. So much more 3.5-year-old plus. And in terms of total number of bucks killed that season, it was 43% of 3.5 or older. We killed over 3 million bucks, which has only happened in terms of a total buck harvest 3 times since 2007. 2007 was the most we've ever killed, but it was close to the record the last full deer season. So lots of bucks. 43% of them were 3.5 or older, and only 26% were 1.5-year-olds.
Yeah, that's incredible. And what a wild change. There's a chart in the report that shows that trend for the 1.5-year harvest, which used to be, the vast majority of deer killed were 1.5-year-old bucks. And that has just plummeted over the years to, the reverse, which is great for the deer herd, right? Nick, what's your take on all that? And when you look at these data points, what does that tell you?
Yeah, so I'll take a little bit of a different, I guess, a reverse angle view on what Matt just said, and it's interesting. We are shooting record numbers of deer, and so this will sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but we're not shooting enough deer. And when I say enough deer, the biggest one is antlerless deer.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see the trends. You mentioned charts in the report. If you're someone that doesn't like to really read and you just like to look at pictures, we put a lot of them in the report. Check out the chart where you can see doe harvests over the decades since we've been doing this report. And you can see, in the earliest days of the report and back in the earliest days of the Quality Deer Management Association, there was a huge emphasis on shooting antlerless deer. I remember it as a young hunter. I remember the days we had to get in a lottery to get one antlerless deer tag here in Pennsylvania. And the idea of shooting more just seemed crazy to me, but we became educated as hunters about that. But then what happened was, this is sort of maybe an unintended consequence, because people do enjoy chasing those older age class bucks. You start to hear the rationale of things like, well, the big one was probably right behind her, so I didn't want to shoot the doe, or I didn't shoot him early and I didn't want to shoot him during the rut. And then winter comes and the holidays come and everybody gets fat and tired and they don't want to go back out in the woods. And so the next thing you know, they may have 3 or 4 antlerless tags and they've maybe filled one of them. And so I think that's another big part of this. We are killing record numbers of deer, record numbers of bucks in particular, but we need to shoot more antlerless deer for a lot of reasons, everything ranging from habitat to disease management to, frankly, being a good neighbor and helping feed people out there. We have a lot of hungry people in the country, and so hunters can provide. There's no better story you can tell as a hunter than that you helped somebody put some food on their table while also providing a conservation service. So, yeah, I mean, it's sort of the best of times and the not so best of times, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, I'll comment on that. That is certainly one of the headwinds. And I know that you mentioned Kip being on the podcast recently, and that was the topic of that podcast. Yeah. That's a big deal. And I know I would like to talk about that. And hunters can do it. We can fix the composition of what we're shooting. We did it before. And if you look at that chart that we published that shows the reversal of not only age structure, but we have another one that shows numbers of bucks and does being shot from 2000-ish to 2015. We were shooting anywhere between 5 and 30% more does or antlerless deer than we were bucks. And that changed around 2015. In the basically last decade, we've been shooting about the same number of bucks and does, or less does than bucks, as Nick just said. That's something that is an easy, I say easy, but it's something we can change. We can shift that. But, it's good to celebrate too. And where I started, I like starting on a positive, right? And paying attention to look at the things that, if hunters want to think about, both sides of our mouth talking about good and bad, there are some great things happening right now. There's some bad things that I know we'll talk about that we can't control, and there's little parts of that we can control, like disease. But in terms of the composition of how many does versus bucks being shot, that's something hunters can change, and we can change it in a season or two. We just need to educate ourselves about the importance of it. But, by and large, I think hunters are enjoying some really good things that are happening. And certainly the number of mature bucks out there is important. Not to everybody, but it's an important thing. And it gets people to sit a little bit longer, maybe spend a little bit extra money on that gear, which helps everything. And that's one of the things that I look at when I look at the deer report, is that things are great in some ways.
Yeah. Well, I think an interesting thing to consider here is the fact that, to large degree, the QDMA and everyone who followed the best practices and management objectives and ideas that you guys shared over the last 20, 30 years, they influenced a dramatic behavior shift over this time period, right? And I think one of the keys to that behavior shift, and the key to any kind of behavior shift related to any issue, oftentimes is looking at what are the incentives. Like, how do you line up what we want to have happen with, the incentives that this user base has. How do we make sure it lines up with the things they care about and helps them achieve their goals, right? And I think when we looked at age structure of buck harvest, that was a big one, right? And we said, hey, here's something that if we go from killing mostly 1.5-year-old bucks to instead trying to manage more towards an even age class and an older age class, here's how that's going to benefit you. You're going to have all of these different benefits to the deer herd, to the deer hunting experience, to the habitat, all of these other things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that led to people realizing, oh, hey, if I do this, it's going to lead to me having a lot more fun and seeing big deer and having these great encounters and seeing rutting behavior that I never saw before. And because it clearly benefited the hunter, they made these changes. When it comes to the antlerless harvest issue, I think some people there's not as clear of a connection, or people aren't seeing that as clearly. It's very obvious that if I don't shoot that 1.5-year-old buck and I give it 2 more years, I'm going to see him again as a 3.5-year-old and he's bigger. And I like that. It's a little bit harder for someone to go out there and not kill a bunch of does this year and then think to himself, oh, that's going to damage my hunting in the future. If anything, the opposite seems to sometimes make common sense. If I don't kill a bunch of does, if I keep the does around, that should bring in the bucks. Or I want to see a lot of deer because a lot of deer makes my deer hunting a lot of fun. So yeah, why would I want to kill all the does? That seems to be a continued challenge for a lot of people to get excited about doing that when they think it might actually negatively impact their experience in some kind of ways. Can either one of you, whoever wants to jump in first on this one, tackle that a little bit? And we did this with Kip, and we've talked about it year after year for a number of years now, but it seems like it's not something that we can step away from yet. Can someone speak a little bit about how this will improve our hunting experience, improve our habitat for better deer hunting in the future if we prioritize this? So let's clearly make the connection between being more aggressive with doe harvest and how that equals better deer hunting and a better deer hunting experience. Nick, maybe I'll let you tackle that because you look primed. I see you.
I was smiling as you were talking. Yeah. I wanted to. It's like a bird dog. It just couldn't hold my point there. So it's like the person that was out of shape and they worked really hard and they got in shape and it was great and they know exactly how they got in shape. And then they took their foot off the gas a little bit, and now a couple years go by and they haven't really done the things that got them to where they were needed to be. And they'll take a look in the mirror and their clothes don't fit as well. And they're like, well, what the heck happened? And so they know deep down what happened. And so it's just coming back to reality. So I think it's two things. I think it's the group that came up through, and these are people my age, by the way, and Matt's not much younger than I am. And you're the young guy in the group, Mark. But as we were emerging as very dedicated, hard hunters, we were being brought up in this approach that you need to shoot more does. And so we learned what it took to get in shape, deer shape. And then seeing is believing. When we started, it's one thing to talk about seeing mature deer, but it's another thing to start seeing them when you've never really seen them. People used to think they saw a big buck, right? And it was like a 2-year-old that just happened to somehow survive the previous season. Mm-hmm. When they see their first 3 or 4-year-old, it's like, man, the light goes on. Like, that is not even the same animal. And that's whenever people started to catch on that, like, okay, this is worth a pound of flesh here. We need to do A, B, and C if we want D to happen. And so I think our group has taken our foot off the gas a little bit. We're like, we shot a bunch of does. Now I just want to wait out because we got addicted to shooting big bucks, which, I mean, who wouldn't? I don't blame people for that. And then the group following behind them sort of already grew up with nice deer. Okay, they kind of got to skip the part where, like, Matt and I both have a big box in our basements of 18-month-old bucks that we shot when we were kids, right? They don't have those. They've only known big deer, and they don't remember what it took to get there. So it's like basically being born and being in shape and being an Olympic athlete. They skipped all the steps that it takes to get there. And so I think we have to sort of re-educate again and have people understand. I mean, I can tell you, the year previous to this, I didn't shoot as many does on my land as I wanted to, and it came back to bite me this year in buck season because you couldn't see a mature buck if it wasn't on camera or moving at night because they didn't have to go anywhere. There were too many does. Even just one or two extra does in an area can dramatically impact your chances of seeing a mature deer. As soon as that mature deer finds a doe that he connects with, he's going to take her to cover, and he's not going to move for 2 or 3 days. And if he doesn't have to go far to find the next one, he's going to do the very same thing. And so, Mark, you've had so many people over the years on your show, and people that listen. I hear you and Tony talk about it all the time. You can be in the prime of first 10 days in November and go 9 of those days without seeing a buck.
Yeah.
The more does you have, the more likely that's going to be. So we have to re-educate people on those points.
Yeah. Matt, would you add anything on that front?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I was thinking. There's the why it happened, and the last decade or so. I think Nick's right. There's more opportunity at more mature bucks, and so people are limited on their time, right? And 25, 35 years ago, they were limited on their time, and as well, time doesn't change, but there's just more opportunity at more mature bucks. So there's that part of the why is just the first deer they see may be a mature buck, or the third deer they see or something, because there's more of them. I think also people are a little bit gun shy, literally and figuratively, because there were some shifts 10 years ago in terms of some issues happening and people backed off on shooting does, and we just haven't pushed hard to get them to do that. From the benefit standpoint, to answer your question, at a personal level, and then also at the the system level, at the what's good for the herd, what's good for the environment. There's both of those things. I make it a personal responsibility on myself to shoot does because I know it achieves success for both of those things. It will make my hunting better, and it's hard to say that when a few minutes ago I just told people how great things are on the age structure side. But it's a moving target every year, and if you aren't shooting, at least in most places in the country, unless it's low productive areas, extreme north, extreme south, drought laden, heavy winters, those kinds of things. But for most hunters, like 9 out of 10 hunters, you should be shooting at least a doe for every buck that you take on a property or in a county, and that will keep things balanced. And if you don't do that, the heyday that we're enjoying right now will go backwards. And so that's a real risk. I mean, for the past 7 years, 5 of the last 7 years, we've shot more bucks than does nationally. It doesn't take that many years. We will start seeing a shift. And if we don't change it from a hunter perspective and start shooting more does, that 43% of mature bucks in the harvest will start dropping. And you'll start seeing a change in it. I mean, that is going to happen. I can, mark my words. So we need to start shooting does, and there's those benefits at the property level and for the person. But then it's also, at the system level, we have to balance deer herds. That's what hunters do. We can provide food to other people. There's the benefit of that too. But if we are not managing deer, I mean, Kip Adams says this, hunting is not our right. It's a privilege. It is. And if we are not managing deer herds, hunters would become obsolete, and there's going to be another way that we have to manage deer. And so, I mean, not to get super serious about it, but hunters got to wake up, and we have to start shooting more does, and we need to start doing it soon. Didn't want to start the podcast that way, but honestly, we do need it, and you will feel it personally, and we'll see it at a system level too if we don't. And so, 5 out of the last 7 years shooting more bucks than does is not a good thing. But that's the thing that I was saying earlier, that I know that's a thing that we can fix. CWD, we hopefully will fix, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, but that's something that's unachievable to most hunters. But all you have to do is decide to shoot a doe, because they're out there just as much as they are bucks. So hunters can fix that. We can start shooting does. I know we can. We've done it before.
And I feel like for a lot of years, when we have looked at what's the existential threat to deer hunting in the future, for a lot of years, we've looked at disease as being, that boogeyman, that very serious, concerning red flag issue. But am I wrong to start? the vibe shift for me, or at least when I'm looking at things and hearing about things and looking at data and looking at the way things are trending and bigger picture system level questions like you're talking about, Matt, I'm starting to feel more and more like antlerless harvest and deer numbers are increasingly becoming that big red flag issue. There's a data point in the report that showed that I think the number was that in the last 5 years, deer depredation tags have gone up 58%.
Yep.
So we're seeing deer management increasingly being outsourced to other methods other than traditional deer hunting to manage that issue. We're seeing, over the last 10 years, more and more communities looking at alternative approaches to managing deer herds, sterilization, sharpshooting, things like that. Our state deer manager here in Michigan basically is pleading with the hunters of Michigan to please start killing more antlerless deer, because if we don't do it, we will lose our management privilege as deer hunters. It sure felt like an existential threat coming from him, emailing the entire state hunting population saying, we need you to start killing more does. Otherwise, we will not be able to have that opportunity as hunters because other means will be pulled in. Am I wrong when I start feeling like this is the issue now?
Well, no. There's a couple of reasons why it is the issue. It's related to disease. Chronic wasting disease
Right.
is spreading. It's in 36 states now. Prevalence rates are getting to the point in some places where it's been the longest, where we're seeing population effects, and having too many deer is a major problem with that. Related to that, though, and I just said this, we can right the ship on that. Hunters have control over that. We just have to be inspired and educated to do so. And so it becomes the lowest hole in the bucket because you can see it change quickly. Along those lines, there's not just one data point in the deer report. I actually just gave a presentation about antlerless harvest issues across the country. It's not only depredation permits, but we're seeing fawn recruitment rates nationally drop, which means the deer are actually producing producing less of themselves because deer densities are getting to the point where fawn recruitment is low, which fawn recruitment's a measure of how many deer are recruited into the population. That's a sign. There's more than that. I can dive into all the points if you want, but it's become the topic because more states are dealing with it, and it is related to some of these other things. And I'm sure Nick has some views on that as well. But I think that's why we're talking about it as much as we are.
Yeah. And I'll throw in one other thing on top of that before I toss it to you, Nick. This idea of bringing back market hunting to try to incentivize people to kill deer. That's a thing that keeps popping up. Just a handful of weeks ago, I heard about Indiana. Someone in Indiana, a legislator, proposing that possibly. So there's another huge threat to the North American model of wildlife conservation and everything we've achieved here in America. Because again, if we aren't managing deer herds, there's all these other trickle-down effects that has on people who aren't deer hunters, who are going to say, hey, we need to deal with this deer hunting thing. And if that means putting some dollars on top of it to get these deer killed, or giving depredation tags to anyone, or hiring sharpshooters, yeah, sure, go for it. We don't care about deer hunters. We just want these deer gone. That's what's at risk if we don't handle our own business ourselves. So, Nick, would you like to add anything on that?
Yeah, appreciate you teaming me up on that one. You being on our board, Mark, just got an email from me about a week and a half ago saying we're looking for some help from the board to work on some of our position statements. And one of those position statements is the sale of wild venison. I never had hoped ever, I've been here over 9 years now, believe it or not, that I think we'd be having meetings about positions on the sale of wild venison. I just thought that was always a protected thing. And so, yeah, it's not just Indiana. Other places, New England and other places, are starting to put out feelers about what it might look like to allow hunters to sell venison. And so, we're not just, this is not a scare tactic to get listeners to say, oh, they're just, trying to raise our hackles here. This is reality. We're having meetings about it at the NDA. We're having meetings about our focus really being shifted toward antlerless harvest for the reasons we talked about. That's not to say we still don't care about good age classes and bucks and mature deer and habitat. If you follow all of our stuff, you see that it's all still very much there. We care about it. I just personally posted a habitat video from yesterday running a chainsaw all day. Okay, so we still care about that. But good habitat also is an important disease control as well, because the better habitat you have, the less congregated deer have to be. And so it all goes hand in hand. And that's what we're about at the NDA, is sort of teaching that comprehensive style of management that's good for all the things, from hunting all the way down to herd management, habitat management, management of other species. And so, yeah, we're concerned about those things. We're not just making them up. We wish we didn't have to talk about them, but these are conversations that we're having. Sort of a behind the scenes look at the NDA. We're having these conversations about how do we make sure people understand our position, as we don't support the sale of wild venison. So.
Yeah. Lot to tackle there, and we haven't even really. I guess, Matt, you alluded to it a little bit, but I'm increasingly seeing papers or articles exploring, threats to biodiversity, and white-tailed deer being pointed to as one of the major threats against biodiversity. So, because of the overpopulation of white-tailed deer and their impacts on habitat, it's negatively influencing other species. What a crazy thing to think about when we, as deer hunters who consider ourselves tremendous conservationists and people that really care about the natural world, when the thing that we care about so much is negatively impacting the rest of the thing we care so much about. That's not a good thing. And it's also not good for, the future of this resource if you have the conservation community split, where you have the deer hunting world saying, hey, we want lots of deer and we want great deer hunting. And then you have other folks who care about the natural world saying, well, yeah, but there's so many deer, it's negatively impacting the habitat for all these other critters. And we don't want that happening either. We're losing allies there, or possibly losing our opportunities, as we've already discussed. So we need to take care of our own business. We need to, we got to clean our bedroom, right? Before we can worry about all that other stuff. And that seems, like you said, Matt, the great thing about the antlerless issue and the deer population issue is that the connection between problem and solution is so clear and so actionable and so much within our hands. While disease sometimes feels like, golly, CWD is one of those deals where it seems so much more challenging to wrap your head around. How do we really fix this in the long term? So,
100%.
So yeah, like you said, Matt, hate to start on a downer on that front, but since we are, let's keep on rolling with downers. The natural transition is to disease, and that has been a major issue we've talked about over the years. Nick, can you update us a little bit on where we stand with CWD? Is the concern level at the same place it has been in recent years? Are we trending positively or negatively? Where are we at?
Yeah, real quick, I do want to say it's not a complete downer to shoot more antlerless deer. I mean, it's a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We have more opportunities and tags than ever. Matt and I, we walked the walk. We were, I think I shot the most does on the NDA team. Matt was right there. Cole out in Missouri. So we actually are trying to develop contests and things even within our team, because it's so much fun too. So
Great
it's
point.
not the end of the world.
Very
so yeah, I just want to say that. Yeah, CWD. Then I go right to the end of the world, right? Okay, so yeah, as Matt had said, we're in 36 states now. Recently added Georgia, seeing it pop up in some other states where it hadn't been before. Yeah, I mean it's out there. It's obviously, we can't deny the fact that it's growing and spreading in different areas in the country. There are some really, what I would call white hot fires of CWD in a few places in the country. Obviously, some areas in Wisconsin. We have in South Central Pennsylvania, one of those spots where, at this point, you can start to see some population level decline. The things that people said would never happen are actually happening, and there's real peer-reviewed science that shows that. And so it's frustrating for us, because we have, there's some folks out there who, have a platform that talk down on the NDA because we talk about CWD and we're the gloom and doom. And it's funny, because it's the last freaking thing we ever want to talk about. And so it's just amazes me that people take that position on it. Listen, It is our responsibility as the country's premier conservation organization for deer to talk about CWD and to talk about what hunters can do to help. And that's the one nice thing about the disease, if there is one, is that hunters can actually help. They can do things like fill their antlerless tags. They can do things like fill in their antlered tag even. But a lot of states, of course, are like one buck states, so that's just one deer. So definitely fill your antlerless tags if you can. They can do things like be careful about how they handle their deer when it's down and not drive it across the country, and not do a number of these other things, not feeding deer if you're in a disease area, that type of thing. Those best management practices are out there. We talk about them a bunch. We help several states in the country communicate about CWD, and it's just about people doing their part and helping more so than it is just getting in the fetal position and hoping it goes away. That's not how it works. And so, as much as we can slow the spread, and it's not everywhere. I mean, if you were to just put the little pins in the map where it is versus where it's not, it's still not, as far as we know, in most places. That's good. And so let's sort of hold it at bay until the science can catch up and we can come up with some realistic and feasible ways of addressing it out there in the wild. So, wish we didn't have to talk about it, but we have a responsibility. We just can't pretend it's not there.
Yeah. So one of the things that for a number of years now we've talked about is what you just ended with there, which is we need to follow all the best practices. We need to try to manage herd numbers and make sure we are dealing with carcasses properly and not transporting this to somewhere else, because we just need to slow the spread, stem the bleeding until the science catches up, till solutions arise in some kind of way. And a couple of years ago, I don't remember what year it was, but recently the CWD Research and Management Act passed, which is going to help us get some funding for some of this research and hopefully fast track some of these things. And that was viewed as something that would, hopefully help that science catch up. I'm just curious, are there any updates on what's happened coming out of the passage of that bill, and or any updates when it comes to research or science or possible solutions? Is there any good news on that front? Are we making progress?
Yeah, I think we are. I mean, I think we learn something every time a new research project is done, whether it be a actual biological research or even a human dimensions project, right? The Research and Management Act remains a good idea. It still only gets funded at slightly over half of what it's authorized to fund. So we're getting like 17 million. And that then gets split between wild deer conservation type research and farm deer research. And on the farm deer side, they have primarily been focusing a lot of their money and attention on genetics research. On the wild side, we're looking at a whole bunch of other things. It's a lot broader than that. And so, genetic research, that's been a hot button issue lately. There's some states that put forth some legislation. Oklahoma last year went as far as to authorize people to start putting genetically altered deer out into the wild. And so, before anyone listening to this, don't take this as me being against genetic research, because that's not the case at all. I think that CWD is very complex. I think there are a lot of different things that we have to learn about in order to come up with something to actually address it. But also, we can't put all our eggs in that basket because, number one, there's still, no matter how much genetics work has been done, nobody has come up with a deer that is immune to CWD. All they've been able to come up with is some that are a little more resistant to it. And then when they get it, they keep it longer. Well, anybody that's been paying attention to anything about CWD knows the last thing we want is a deer with CWD on the landscape longer. Okay. So that doesn't mean that we just quit looking at it. Maybe we're onto something and that's sort of a step in the process. I don't know. It's well above my ability to understand it. But that's a far, far reach from saying we need to start modifying deer that are a little more resistant and then put them out in the wild and see what happens. Like any credible scientist will tell you, you just do not conduct those types of experiments and put at risk wild deer, which is held in the public trust. They belong to all of us. That's a gigantic leap. And so we're behind smart research. We're behind smart paced research, peer reviewed. Let's sample in controlled ways and see what we can learn. But we are not behind just throwing deer out on the landscape before we even know what's going to happen. Everybody, the creator of Frankenstein thought it was a great idea until Frankenstein became alive. And then it was like, well, crap, what are we going to do with this? Mm-hmm. We can't do that with our wild deer resource. It's just irresponsible, and we're not there yet.
Yeah. You brought up how, federal funding for that research has not reached the levels we hoped it had. There's been all sorts of talk in recent weeks and months about federal funding. Super hot topic, very fun to talk about. Is there anything related to that that might impact CWD research or any other federal funding tied to deer research, deer habitat? I know there's been a number of conservation organizations that had federal grants tied to habitat work that are now losing that, or those funds are frozen, and there's concerns about that and the implications it could have. Anything related to that front when it comes to deer?
There hasn't been any direct impact on things like the Research and Management Act, although that has to be authorized every year. It's not unrealistic to think that something like that could, get to the floor and they don't appropriate the money and look at it as government waste. I don't know. Or the opposite could be true. So we're all sitting here. We wake up every day and we don't know what we're going to see in the news. And then what you see in the news, we don't know how much of that will actually become reality. So I'll just speak to what we have seen so far and not try to project too far into the future. What we've seen so far is we certainly know some folks in partner organizations that have lost their jobs. We've seen that happen in a few spots. Has it impacted us directly? It probably will in some sense, maybe the pace of things. But then on the other side of it is we have been doing, and this Matt is the best qualified person on the planet to talk about our work that we've been doing with the Forest Service and directly taking trees off the landscape, building habitat. We see reasons for optimism with that. This is an administration that believes in the extraction of resources, and a renewable resource like trees is right up our alley. And, Matt's leading that work for us, and we have reason to believe that we may be doing even more of that work. And so I think it's a day by day for us. And I don't know, if Matt wants to speak further on the forestry part of it, but that's kind of what we see.
Yeah, Matt, can you update us a little bit on what the Public Lands Initiative looks like, how any recent current events influence that?
Yeah, sure. So, a lot of it is at the current level. I haven't seen any direct impacts that has slowed us down on the agreements and contracts that we already have. I do know forest staff that have lost their jobs, unfortunately. Most of those people did not oversee the timber management programs that we are involved with. Some of the volunteer programs that we are doing with forest staff, where we have people go out and help and do projects, was directly impacted or will be in some cases. But Nick just said it really well, and there's not a ton that I can add other than I'm in a wait and see mode. The only thing that has really directly impacted our program is we have some agreements that are in the queue waiting to be executed, which would be new or modified old agreements that have not been signed off on. And that's understandable because there's just a lot of things coming through that they're not signing off on new things. But we have a lot of contracts in place and have work ongoing today. I had an update this morning with one of our contractors, and we have people doing things, active management right now today on on multiple forests. So still doing work. We just may not upload new work for the time being, but I anticipate that being a temporary thing, and at some point we'll have those moving as well.
So that's good. That's great news. What about? I guess this brings me to another one of these larger federal programs that impacts deer habitat that I was going to ask you guys about at a later point, but maybe makes sense now. That's the Farm Bill. We've had a Farm Bill that has not been renewed for several years now. It keeps on getting pushed and pushed and pushed. As I understand it, some of the funds for those programs within the conservation section of the Farm Bill might be withheld, frozen, or all sorts of questions around that. While we're still trying to get this new one passed, where can either one of you speak to where things stand with the Farm Bill in regards to the ways and the programs that impact deer and deer hunters? There's stuff in there that's really important to deer hunters, and a lot of folks that are wondering what's going to happen there. Anyone have thoughts or anything that you have heard on that front yet?
There aren't many political volleyballs bigger than the Farm Bill. So There are so many elements of the Farm Bill that the average person doesn't even realize they're Farm Bill programs. Okay. And so, yeah, I think it's responsible for government to take a hard look at it and see what belongs and what doesn't. It's probably not responsible, though, for it to have gone this long without a resolution. We joke as an organization with Catherine Appling Puller, our director of policy, as an organization that works on the Farm Bill. We joke that as soon as you get one to the finish line, you're starting on the next one, and that's the reality of it. So, in terms of deer programs, things that impact deer, I mean, any conservation program or title that could impact the farm landscape, for example, could have profound impacts on deer and deer hunting. I mean, some of the best deer hunting that people talk about and legendarily have written about is done off of CRP land, right? You hear that all the time in the Midwest, right? Just as one glaring example for deer hunters. So any of these habitat projects that an uneducated person may look at and say, well, that doesn't impact production agriculture, so we need to quit funding it. It's a hypothetical, but those are the types of conversations that are had. That has a profound impact on deer hunting. So I don't think you're going to see any resolution anytime real soon on the Farm Bill. One of the things that's in the Farm Bill, though, that's interesting, there's a program in there that actually can fund venison processors. Or fund states to fund venison processors to help get deer cut up, and also donation programs. And so we're talking about the need to harvest a bunch more deer. And one of the reasons people give often for not shooting more deer is that they don't need it, or they don't have an easy place to get rid of it. Well, one of the major initiatives at the NDA we're working on, one is we're trying to connect more states with that federal program that's in the Farm Bill to have them take advantage of it. But the other thing is we've created this, it's about to be launched here. Maybe by the time this hits the airwaves, it'll be out, but we're launching a national venison processor map where anybody anywhere in the country can go on the web and find their local processor. They can determine whether or not they take donations. Nothing like this exists out there. We've got a lot of partners on it, so we're excited about that. But programs like that one in the Farm Bill as well, just at the time when we're trying to lead people to it and connect them to those dollars, we would hate to see that go away. And we say, oh, that's one tool that we thought we had. Now we don't have it anymore. And so that's why groups like ours participate in the Farm Bill. It does have far-ranging implications. And I don't mean to ramble, but we could go on. We could do a whole show on Farm Bill and habitat.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, we could. Would you add anything, Matt?
Oh, yeah. One thing that I was thinking as Nick was talking about it was related to the antlerless harvest issue that were discussing earlier. One of the causes of hunters to go gun shy, 10 years ago, was reduction in basically deer populations. There was a drop in deer numbers. It was really hard for hunters to be successful in those couple of years. And that's why a lot of states were backing off on their quotas. And there were questions at the time of what was the cause of some of these harvest drops. And at that time, CRP was reduced by like 20% or more. And so, meaning a lot of land was put back into row crop that had been in a type of condition that was conducive to good food and cover for deer, because it was, waist high or neck high brush that deer like to bed in and eat in and spend time. And so that was a direct result of seeing deer numbers dropping and then states backing off on their antlerless harvest. And then hunters have really not returned to that. Now CRP went in a different direction and there's more land in that currently than there had been at that time. But yeah, I mean, it can have far reaching implications from many levels.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking millions of acres of habitat there. And it seems like, even though it did go up a little bit from the previous lows, from everything I've understood, we're still below demand. There's still probably, we're below what it used to be at one point. It's been kind of arbitrarily capped, and it seems like people would like to get into the program that can't. And so, yeah, we're talking millions of acres of land that could be in this great deer habitat, which it's not just great deer habitat. It's great habitat for upland birds, pollinators, grassland birds, small mammals. That's the kind of habitat that provides tremendous benefits for, cleaning our water, sequestering carbon, minimizing erosion, a lot of good stuff there that we're missing out on, unfortunately. So certainly hope a new farm bill is passed here soon with positive conservation title programs, but yeah, a lot of questions around it. And on that front, though, this habitat thing, I was reading an article a while back by the one and only Craig Harper on your website, and he was looking forward towards the next 30 years of deer and deer habitat management in America, and he was kind of thinking about how things have changed over the last 30 years and what that might mean for the future. And one of the things that he was predicting / maybe hoping for was maybe less traditional food plots and farming practices for deer and less supplemental feeding and more of this kind of holistic ecosystem management for deer, that being managing for early successional habitat and old fields and timber stand management and all these different things. And he was pointing towards how there's benefits to your deer hunting. Obviously, it's more cost effective in many cases, and it's better for the larger ecosystem and other species in many cases too. I'm curious what your thoughts are, Nick, on the future when it comes to deer habitat management and kind of the role that we as hunters can play. This is something I've spent a lot of time thinking about recently. And I just see that there's this opportunity for the deer hunting community to make this really significant impact. Like, I feel like we are a conservation army that has only been just barely tapping into our potential. We've started to see what we can do, but there's so much more we could probably be doing. This number I've been citing a lot. There's something like 360 or 380 million acres of land that are owned or leased primarily for hunting in America. A study showed that a handful of years ago. So there's this massive swath of America that we as hunters have influence over. We could probably be doing some spectacular things with that. And in many cases we are. There's lots of examples where we are, but probably a lot more. So I'm just curious, Nick, if you've thought about that at all and what you see, as the leader of America's deer hunting organization, what potential there might be for we as the deer hunting community to really influence things for the better.
I suddenly feel a lot of pressure now that you just said that, the way that you said it. Jeez. Anyway, I'm going to tease out a couple things that you said there. So we'll go back to the Craig Harper article. I'll just say that we have continued to evolve as an organization. Back in the earliest days, we talked about things like food plots, and you saw some big, beautiful ones that are on television, right? And everybody wanted one of these made for television food plots. I'm going to be honest with you. I got 3 or 4 small plots on my place. I like to grow a couple of those and take pictures of them and say, look at me, right? Yeah, exactly. But at the end of the day, like yesterday, I had so much time available to go out and do a project, and I took the chainsaw instead. Okay. And so Craig is absolutely right. We should be building the longer term habitats, not forgetting. I mean, there's definitely a place for food plots and that type of thing for sure. However, it's the longer term stuff you can do on your land that makes it better for all species, which is something we've really tried hard to do here at the NDA, because we do, because deer is in our name and deer have such a profound impact on habitat. We care about other species as well. We recognize that what we do will help not just deer, but other species. And so if you're doing like a clear-cut bedding area like I was working on yesterday, it's not just a bedding area for deer. That's going to be early successional habitat for the next several years. It's going to be browse. It's going to be nesting, ground nesting bird cover. It's going to be all types of things. And so, and it can be cheaper. As Craig also would point out, it's a lot cheaper to do something like old field management that already has tons of things that deer want to eat in it than it is to go out and kill it all and use herbicides and equipment, labor, and time to put new seed in the ground. So that's that part of it. The other part of it is, you're right, Mark. There's no bigger army than deer hunters when it comes to people willing, not just buying land. You don't just buy, anybody listen to this knows, you don't just buy a piece of land. You could buy a piece of land to deer hunt and then you're just all done. I mean, no, that's when the work really starts. All you're doing is buying yourself a lifetime project.
Yeah.
And so you have to continually be working at it. And so we have hunters, whether they own the land or whether they're leasing land or whatever, or volunteering on public land, going out and manipulating habitats like no other hunter. And I used to be in the duck world for a while, right? And duck hunters do a lot of stuff too, but a lot of times it's like redirecting water so that they've got water at the right time. That has benefit as well. I'm not picking on duck hunters. I'm just saying that deer hunters, in terms of manipulating landscapes, buying land, manipulating private landscapes, they're an army of people that can make a huge difference. And we're trying very hard to educate people on, you don't want to cut down all your trees and make big 5-acre monoculture food plots. There are better ways to do it. Better ways for your deer hunting, better ways for other species. Frankly, just better ways for the planet and conservation. And so we're trying to be much more holistic in our thinking that way.
Yeah. Matt, would you add anything on any of those fronts?
As I look back at my career, I've been with the organization a long time. I think that is perfectly said, that it's this resource. Not only is it an iconic species that a lot of people care about, a lot of impassioned people care about deer, whether you're a hunter or not. They're just so visible, and people align with the image of a white-tailed deer. But from a hunter standpoint, I mean, we've talked before about having, the majority of hunters are deer hunters, and they are more educated today. And as I think about my career and this organization's history, there are a lot of successes in terms of teaching hunters what might be right versus wrong, or what would be helpful versus not helpful. And there's some amazing trends out there. Shifting age structure, that came through education, not through regulation. There's regulations out there in states or provinces where they're forcing hunters to do one thing, but by and large, that's an education-based campaign that hunters change what they were doing. Habitat, we have been teaching about habitat management since day one, because it's one of the cornerstones of managing deer. And I do see shifts and changes based on Craig's article that you're talking about, but just in terms of people asking questions, and we get requests on how to do certain things. There's a lot of information out there about different habitat management techniques, but there's a growing trend over the past decade or so of these techniques that we're talking about in terms of managing holistically and managing ecosystems. And when I talk about all of this, deer report data, big issues, the big picture stuff coming down the pike, I generally do have a positive view, because I do think that hunters will take action once educated. They hear messages coming from a lot of different places. Now, not just NDA. They're hearing it from mass media like yourselves and others. They hear from their state or provincial wildlife agencies. They hear from their friends, and generally the messaging that's coming across is more uniform, although there's mixed messaging out there, of course, what's good or bad about certain things. But I do have a positive view that we can change the tide, because I've been part of it. We've changed hunters' attitudes about things. And when I get a little bit impassioned myself about hunters need to wake up about this or that, it's because I know we can do it. I've seen it.
Yeah. So that's a perfect way to kind of segue to the last thing I want to ask you about. I want you both to imagine a future, let's say 20 years from now. And I'd like you to imagine two different versions. In one version, we have been wildly successful, and we are living in a golden age for not just deer hunting, but also the landscape that surrounds deer hunting, wildlife, the natural resources. That's option A. I'd like you to also imagine option B, in which our deer hunting resource and the natural resources and wild world around it have deteriorated. Our hunting opportunities have deteriorated. And we are now looking back on 2025 and saying, golly, we had no idea how good we had it. How do we screw this up? What would lead us to option A, and what might lead us to option B? If you were to be in that future world, and I'll let Matt go first, and then Nick, you can close this up. Matt, if option A comes to be true, and we are living the golden days and things are great, what got us to that point? And then part 2 would be then what got us to that dire situation? What would you expect would have happened in that case?
That's a great question. Option A, I think we can get there through collaboration. Everybody working in unison towards a single or a uniform feeling. So if we're all messaging certain things around disease management or population management or habitat management, and not but the majority of hunters are working towards that and are hearing the same message come from their state agency and their cousin and NDA and MeatEater and Wired to Hunt, and we're all saying the same thing, and they listen and they do it. That's how we get to option A. Option B is where chaos ensues and people believe things that are counter to what the science says. They are counter to what the right thing to do is. And unfortunately, there are mixed messages out there, and we need to quell that as much as possible. Option B to me is the dire condition is where people don't value deer anymore the way that we value them today, whether you're a hunter or not. If there is a future where the dire condition is people see deer in a negative way, they're vermin, they're a problem, they're not something we can maybe not just utilize, but they're there for us. They're a valuable natural resource for everybody to enjoy, to look at, to harvest and eat, to just recreate around, and they make our lives better. That is the dire thing that I think would end up happening. And unfortunately, there are things that might get us there. Too many deer, them ruining the environment because they eat everything. Invasive species issues, disease issues, zoonotic disease issues where we might come down with something, and market hunting where they're just valued as something that might not be what they are. But I believe in us. I believe in society. I mean, as crazy as things are today in 2025, there are some uniform things that I know that the hunting and conservation community can come together. And I think the people and the systems and the organizations that have the loudest megaphone, as long as we're all on the same page and saying the same thing, when it comes to these issues, we can get to A. That's what I think.
Love it. Nick, what are your thoughts on those two?
Yeah, I'm glad you made Matt go first. He did such a good job. I can just sort of coast in here. Yeah, I mean, I'll take a little bit different swing at it. We're probably going to say the same thing, maybe just in a different way. We were just talking about habitat a little bit ago. And I think if we can accomplish the sunshine scenario, if people begin to understand that good quality deer and good quality hunting, like good quality deer, are actually a symptom. They're a symptom of something else. They're a symptom of being a good steward of the land and good habitat. And so I think unintended consequence of the earliest days of this organization was I think that the animal became the focus. Not from an organizational standpoint. QDMA from day one talked about like build habitat, yada, yada, yada. But from the outsider perspective, myself included, when I first heard of the QDMA and this idea of older deer, like I was so focused on the deer that I failed to understand everything around that deer. And that's what really matters. It's everything around the deer that matters. And so I think that we will continue to educate the people to help bring people around to this idea that good deer are a symptom of good habitat and good stewardship. And I am like Matt, I'm very optimistic. Hunters have shown forever that they're willing to rise to the occasion and do that. And also that you don't have to own land to do this. We've done many projects. Frankly, all of Matt's work in the forestry initiative is all public land. We've done through our branches and personally been part of many. Mark, you as well. From all of your great work and messaging. is done on land that we all own collectively, private or public land. And so you don't have to own land to do it. You just have to say, you know what? I want to be part of what's really at play here, and that's good habitat, good stewardship. And a symptom of that is going to be good deer and good deer hunting. And then the other part I'll touch on more on the, if things don't go well. There are sort of negative anti-messaging against things like we're talking about. They're against CWD, about anything that's bad news. There's a segment out there that they want to just downplay it, and it's not real, and it's really sad, and it's really short-sighted because, like, you know what, it might we might sell less magazines or write less articles, or we might less people might listen to what I have to say because they don't hunt anymore or they're mad about CW. That is so short-sighted and so sad in my view. Like, we can have all the things. It is plentiful out there. We can talk about, we do it every single day at the National Deer Association. We talk about the stuff that we don't want to talk about necessarily, but have to. And we talk about all the fun stuff too that you can do. You can do both. And I would like us all to do both and do both together. It can be tough love, right? Like, your parent probably shouldn't be your best friend. Okay. If that's the case, there's probably not a whole lot of parenting going on. So I think you can have tough love no matter what platform you have. You know, if you're a writer and you're concerned about selling articles, I think you can sell a heck of a lot of articles being able to talk about all the things, and people will still love you and respect you for that. And so I would say that if we start falling into these traps, like we don't need to care about CWD, or this is all, or that one that always blows my mind is like, this is a big money maker. Like, dude, I'm telling you right now, CWD is, we would be working on far better things if we didn't have to work on that. Okay. And so that's what we want to do. We want to work on the fun things and do the fun things. So it can be tough love sometimes. I get it. We're not always the sexiest, flashiest message at times. We can be sort of the no fun zone, because we don't always tell people what they want to hear. But I don't think we'd be responsible if we were just, being everybody's best friend as a sort of a parent to deer organization. So a little bit of a soapbox rant, but I think your question sort of led me right to that point.
Well, important point to make. And I will, as a deer hunter myself who learned a whole heck of a lot from your organization over the last 20 years, I can personally say that while there's been the occasional not so fun topic, I've had a whole hell of a lot of fun along the way too. Right. And much of it has been because of the great work that you guys have been doing. So thank you for that over the many long years. And thank you for sharing all of this here today. Real quick, can you, Nick, give us a quick reminder of where we can connect with the NDA, how we can become a member, or see the 2025 Deer Report in full?
Yeah, absolutely. Deer Report's free to everybody, by the way. You can just download that on our website. Just type Deer Report in the search box, deerassociation.com. Whether you become a member or not, that's free to anybody, and we encourage you to check that out. If you are so inclined to become a member, you can also just go to our website, and there's a real easy to find join button there. You can join for as little as $0 and become just a basic member and get our newsletter every week. Or you can become a premium member. You get some other benefits, and you can become a life member too. I got one of those in my inbox over the weekend. I'm looking forward to responding to. And so, again, talking about symptoms and whatnot, I think us being good stewards of our mission is the most important thing. A symptom of that is we get people that join us and want to do a little bit more for deer hunting than just go out and pull a trigger and release an arrow. So we're going to focus on being really good at our mission, and we hope that compels you to want to be part of it in some bigger way.
Amazing. Well, I appreciate everything you guys do. I appreciate you being here today, and look forward to another chat soon.
We appreciate you, Mark. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark.
All right, and that is a wrap. I appreciate you being here with me. Thank you for joining me and being a part of this community. And until next time, stay wired to hunt.